Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I am Ryan Calkins, here representing the Port of Seattle. I am proud to welcome you to Terminal 117, a special place here in the South Park community along the Duwamish River. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge, with respect and gratitude, that the landscape that surrounds us includes the ancestral lands and waters of the indigenous Coast Salish peoples, and that these communities continue today, stewarding the life-giving water and land and contributing to our regional culture and economy. Join me in keeping these communities' legacies in mind as we consider the history of this site and look ahead to this exciting restoration and community open space project. We are standing on what will soon be 14 acres, including nearly 1/2 mile of restored estuarine fish and wildlife natural resources, including critical habitat that will contribute to Chinook salmon recovery. It will also be a substantial community asset, a safe, clean, green, open space, combining public use with environmental education, community-inspired artful design, and shoreline access within walking distance of the entire community. And it will serve as an opportunity for advancing the Green Jobs Initiative that the Port is building through its newly adopted workforce development policy. But before that, we should look back to what was here before. This site was heavily contaminated with pollution caused by previous industrial activity. In 2003, the EPA designated Terminal 117 a Superfund site, and the Port and the City of Seattle were responsible for cleaning up the contamination. In 2007, the community successfully advocated with the Port Commission to clean the site to the highest levels and transform the cleaned up property into habitat and public open space. Throughout the cleanup, the Port and the community maintained an open dialogue on design ideas, and we know we have a better outcome as a result of that strong partnership. This site is an exciting addition to the Port of Seattle's efforts to restore and create habitat in the green Duwamish watershed and Elliott Bay. There are many agencies and tribes that had a hand in either permitting the project or consulting on the design, including NOAA, the EPA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Washington State Department of Ecology, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe and Suquamish Tribe, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and King County. And of course, we are also grateful for the support that we received from Senator Patty Murray and her office. This is a great milestone, but it won't be the last. The Port and the Duwamish Valley residents will continue to work side by side on building environmental and community health and economic prosperity in this community. Late last year, we adopted the Duwamish Valley Community Benefits Commitment, which was co-written by community members and Port staff, establishing a one-of-a-kind and lasting partnership. It's my honor to introduce one of our community partners who is crucial in representing community interests in the cleanup and design of T-117. Without their efforts and commitment to making this a place that works with and for the neighbors, we would not be here today. Let me now turn it over to Lena Lopez, Executive Director of the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition and a South Park resident. Thank you, Paulina, for joining us today.
Thank you, Commissioner Calkins. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning still. I'm very thrilled to be here today with you all. My name is, again, Lena Lopez, and I'm the Executive Director of the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition, which is a local community ground organization here in the Duwamish Valley that has been advocating for the river cleanup since 2001. First, I also want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and we honor with gratitude land itself for the Duwamish tribe. Terminal 117 is an extraordinary project. They started over almost 2 decades ago, and we have been engaging through our organization and our community to be at the place that we want to be. As you know, the Duwamish Valley It's an environmental justice community with disproportionate impacts of toxic pollution and environmental burdens, creating health disparities and cumulative impacts for especially communities of color, which consequently suffer from many different health threats like high asthma rates. As we're facing a public health and economic crisis at a precedented scale, we know that impacts of both the climate crisis and COVID are disproportionately impacting our working people here in the Valley, lower income families and communities of color. So the solutions that need to come, they need to recover from the health perspective as well as economic impacts to transition to justice and climate justice. Bringing projects like this one, like Terminal 117, give us a lot of hope and gratitude. Let us continue working for transformational and creativity ways with government, in this case the port, that brings alongside impacted communities front and center. Through innovative collaboration and with our federal, local partners, we were able to make this project a success. And now we're looking forward for the economic, ecological, and community benefits to this community. Especially remarkable has been the community voice that was brought, and as the voice was reflected for the cleanup, the design, for the site, as well as critical removal action for soil and river sediments to reduce the PCB levels that were so harmful to our community. Pushing for a good, clean possible for many future uses was the priority, including developing of spaces, river habitat, and public access into a community that has very limited public access. Restoration of the 14 acres in the urbanized industrial area is giving us good hope also for the fishing community can practice in fishing practices in a cultural, respectful way. The connection to community, as we are over a decade of involvement in the design, giving those voices and presence as community can be part of it, creating spaces for them. And now we have a space for even making this connection through trainings and job opportunities. And I do want to consider that as we are bringing more community participation for the future and monitoring, training, stewardship, et cetera. The education will be a great piece too, and bringing our local school certification of next generations to bring this environmental field and their interest. We have some youth representation here, and we are looking forward for them and engagement, as well as bringing this economic prosperity that Commissioner Calkins was referring to. Possibly bringing development through the creation of local training, green jobs, stewardship, for the years to come, and the need to train on our youth to be the stewards of the land. Moving forward, I also invite you that we continue to looking for solution on environmental justice and bringing these efforts to invest in our community to thrive in place in communities that what it means is bringing the economic ways so they can be here established with affordable housing, paying good jobs, high quality education, perhaps a maritime education, and digital equity, as well as good food, clean air, and water. We learn from and be led by experiences for those impacted by structural inequity and racism, and to generate a better future together. We remain hopeful. Thank you for prioritizing the Duwamish Valley as our work advances on climate resilience, equitable, and healthy communities. And thank you to the dozens and dozens of people that make this possible, community, tribal, local, state government agencies that make this remarkable collective effort, Terminal 117, a place of justice, learning, and future. Thank you. And I would like to introduce next Maggie Angel Cano, representing as well some of our youth voice. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Magdalena Angel, and I work at the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition. I am also a South Park resident for 20 years and a Port Community Action Team member. I would like to start today with telling you a little bit about who I am. I am a privileged first-generation graduate from the University of Washington. 20 years ago, my family moved to South Park, and now we call this place home. At the age of 13, I became part of the first pilot of the Duwamish Valley Youth Corps. With the efforts of the youth involvement beginning, I saw myself documenting many images and stories that I would collect. When going to college as a first-generation student, I was aware of the type of careers that could lead me to work in my community. Now, the reason why I tell you a little bit about my story and how I got to where I am is because it took me 10 whole years to be where I am. It took me a lot of work navigating through school and determining what career path I wanted. This is the case currently still with many of our youth. As we see hundreds of Duwamish Valley Youth Corps youth coming into our program, we see them enthusiastic and really excited to learn about the Superfund and the Duwamish River and source control. But yet, we are trying our hardest to create a pathway for them for meaningful jobs. Having one of the highest numbers of youth of color in the Duwamish Valley, we yet are seeing numbers not match with the amounts of employees from the Duwamish Valley in those industries along the Duwamish River. For our youth witnessing projects like Terminal 117 and this restoration, it is empowering for them. It is physically letting them see the hard work that they do in this community is paying off. Today, we are here to celebrate the big achievement to a healthier Duwamish Valley. Thank you to the Port of Seattle, to the City of Seattle, to EPA, and to the community for taking part of this cleanup and empowering our community leaders and our youth. Let's keep working together. Next, we want to have a Maritime High School. Many of our youth do not have the opportunity to go to college because of the low income. Today, I am asking for us to work together and create this dream come true, to create pathways of jobs for our students and our youth to come together and work in the Duwamish Valley without having to go through a hard path like me of 10 years. Let's bring these opportunities to our youth. Thank you. Next up, I would like to welcome George Blomberg.
Hi, my name is George Blomberg. I work in the environmental section at the Port of Seattle. Some of the statements folks are making here today are extraordinary. You've heard stewardship, natural resource values, migratory fish, and resiliency. What I'd like to do with your patience is just take a few minutes to describe how this present landscape is going to change. We've already heard a great deal about what it was, its legacy. It's clean now, but what's going to happen in the future? What about this next phase of habitat restoration and public shoreline access in this formerly inaccessible contaminated site? Nothing would give me greater joy, or the Port of Seattle greater joy, or citizens of South Park and Georgetown greater joy than to plant these guys, this marsh vegetation that's in front of us, at this site. There'll be 4,000 of these plants in 18 months' time in this area. There'll be 15,000 native trees and shrubs on the bank line here. How's that going to happen? This podium the base of this podium is about 14 to 15 feet above mean low water. When we're finished, 18 months from now, success will be, I'll be standing here soaking wet. The elevation at this spot is going to be reduced by 8 to 4 feet. The tide will flood this site twice a day, and this marsh vegetation will prosper and become robust. That will be success. We'll have a 14-acre beneficial environmental footprint, fish and wildlife habitat restoration. That's nearly 6/10 of a mile. We'll excavate between 30 and 35,000 tons or cubic yards of material here. This is clean material after the cleanup, and we're going to decrease the elevation of this site such that if I stand in the site at high water, I won't be able to reach the surface. Then these plants and this bowl will become an incredible environmental resource. I mentioned that there was public access associated with this as well. We'll be surrounded by fish and wildlife habitat. We're inviting the community to experience this cleaned up, safe shoreline as an educational, environmental learning opportunity and as a stewardship opportunity. These plants don't plant themselves. We need help to do that. We need help to maintain them in terms of environmental stewardship. when we began this project, we knew that we wanted to design an effective fish and wildlife habitat project. We also knew from the beginning that this would be an important community asset for folks in South Park and Georgetown to visit a cleaned up shoreline. There are nearly 4,000 residents within walking distance of this site. We worked with, we used our technical expertise and worked with a very gifted designer artist, Kristen Tollefson, to describe how public access would flow around this site. We've identified 8 areas where there are viewpoints and overlooks that will offer information about the site. Behind me will be a pier, approximately 185 feet long from grade level out into the channel. You'll be able to walk on that pier and descend via a separate pathway to a hand-carry boat launch. You'll be able to physically walk into the marsh and walk through the marsh, learn about that. You'll be able to stand on the pier and look to the south end of the site where there'll be a 40-foot high viewing platform. People can see the entire expanse of the site. They can see Mount Rainier in the evening. This site offers extraordinary environmental attributes. It'll also offer an extraordinary resource for the community, a durable resource, a resource that grows over time. This will only become richer with port and community interaction. Just a few more comments about the significance of this site. Our estuary that we see around us we've lost 99% of this sort of habitat. It's gone. We'll restore at this site, just simply the marsh vegetation alone will increase the amount of marsh vegetation in the Duwamish estuary nearly 150%. There were once 1,400 acres of marsh. Success here is going to be about 5 acres of combined marsh and riparian vegetation. Clearly a small effort, but absolutely critical because of the estuarine location here in the estuarine transition zone. This marsh was here for millennia. We know that people lived here for millennia as well. And one thing that I've noticed as I've worked with folks on designing this project is the notion of a memory, that this site has a memory, an environmental memory in terms of fish and wildlife habitat, migratory salmon, and a memory that perhaps Mr. Fernandez will assist us with, a cultural memory as well. Restoration at this site, bringing people to this site, involves acknowledging that memory and turning that memory into reality at this site. I'm grateful for your patience. This site will prosper and only become richer and richer. We look forward to developing more sites like this in the Duwamish. This site demonstrates a balance between, as Paulina was mentioning, the port's financial management, its environmental management, and its relationship to communities. We need to balance that. This site will become a mitigation site, and environmental credits here will be useful for other development agencies and interest in the Duwamish. This site will return value financially to the port and the citizens of South Park, Georgetown, and King County. Its environmental attributes are clear, and its community status as an asset is clear as well. I think projects like this demonstrate balance, and that's what you should expect from all of us in the future. Thanks for your patience. Oh, I'd like to introduce Mr. Scarcella as well. He's the business end of this project.
Thank you, George. You're a tough act to follow. So he spoke about the project improvements in general, and I'll just briefly speak about, who's going to build it. So Scarcella Brothers has been in business since 1945, and we've been based here in Western Washington the entire time. The company was founded by 2 brothers that immigrated to the United States from Italy at the ages of 17 and 19. They moved here to Seattle, and they found jobs in construction, digging basements and installing small sewer line projects, learning more about the business and taking on more work. And through hard work and disciplined savings, they slowly built up their business. Some of the first projects that they performed were here in Seattle. My grandfather and his brother and their crew built city streets in the city of Seattle, installed underground utilities for King County, and that's where we got our start. They slowly purchased the equipment they needed and ultimately put it to work all over Washington and other states here in the Northwest. We still know what they knew then. We know that tools, trucks, and equipment help, but really it's the people that build things. Projects like this employ skilled men and women that show up, work hard, they work together, and we leave a tangible improvement, and then we go home safely to our families. Those are the goals. Sometimes projects like this can mean jobs when they're needed the most. Union operators, laborers, truck drivers, carpenters, pile bucks, and countless others. Jobs that pay well and reward skill, experience, and dedication. We're going to do whatever we can to involve the community when we can, and we don't take it lightly that we're right here in somebody's neighborhood. On behalf of Scarcella Brothers, our employees, and their families, I'd like to thank the Port of Seattle, but especially thank the Park neighborhood for having us. We're happy to be a part of the team. We look forward to delivering an exciting finished product for this community. Thank you very much. Commissioner?
So I'm just coming up to wrap things up. We've got one more special guest, but I do want to thank all of our panelists. It's really, I didn't know the story of the Scarcella Brothers, and so it's really exciting for me to hear that this project will be carried out by a business that lived the American dream when it first got here. Immigrants coming to the United States through hard work, taking advantage of the opportunities that this country can provide, and being a success story. And I know that in dozens of conversations with Paulina that that's our goal for this community and the work that the Port does here, that we engage this community, which is a significant immigrant community in our region, to say, how do we develop the skills that you might learn on a project like this so that you're the generation that builds an enterprise like Scarcella Brothers. It's really exciting. And Maggie, thank you so much. You have mentioned your passion for the Maritime High School. You know that I'm deeply committed to that and for this community, so it's very exciting to hear that continues to be a concern even in the midst of a pandemic. And Professor George, I like to call him the historian of the Port, thank you so much for your remarks. Now we are going to turn to a very special guest, Roger Fernandez, who is a Native American artist and storyteller. He is going to help ground us today as we embark on this project with a story based in history, culture, and the ecology of the river. From there, we will then head over to a ceremonial turning of the soil behind us so that we can commemorate the milestone for the port, the community, and the river. Roger, please come on up and lead us with the story.
Atning Sinsiam. That means thank you, good people. Thank you, special people, in the language of my people. I'm from the lower Elwha, Nixclayam people. We're called the Clallam people. Mispronounced, our real name is Nixclayam, which means strong people. I am not of the tribes of this area right here. I'm not Duwamish. I'm not Muckleshoot. There are many, many villages that existed along this river at one time, and they were gathered together and sent to a place we call Muckleshoot now. And so the descendants of those people, the first people of this land, they're still here. And I'm honored to be able to say a few things, not on their behalf, but for myself. As a storyteller and an artist and a Coast Salish native person, I want to share a few thoughts that I've been taught by my elders when I was a younger person. As you know, one of the leaders of the Duch-Apsh people, again, their name was mispronounced, not Duwamish, but Duch-Apsh, and I might even be mispronouncing it too, Duch-Apsh, which means people of the inside. Seattle, is what the English speakers called him. Seattle. His real name was Seattle. And so Seattle made a famous speech once. You might have heard it. A lot of people have read it 150 years ago or so. And he starts out the speech in a very powerful way. He was a great orator, as many of our leaders were. And he pointed to the clouds, and I'm glad they're here today. He pointed to the clouds, saying, "Yon clouds have wept tears of compassion upon my people for countless generations." Right away, he was animating the world. He was saying, those clouds, they're living. They have pity upon us. They give us the rain that we might live. And so these clouds are alive. Later in his speech, he says, these rocks that seem to lie dumb in the sweltering in the summer sun, they thrill with the memory of my ancestors. He was animating those rocks and saying, these rocks are living things. Those clouds are living things. What he was inferring all along was this earth is a living thing as well. And one thing that has happened in the past couple hundred years that we Native people here have seen, a culture came here that seemed to have forgotten that. To them, the earth is not a living thing. It is just a thing. It is a noun. And so because of that, they treat the world as a thing, without regards for its feelings, without regards for its breath, without regards for its children, without regards for the things that make this world live, make this world alive. And so again, I'm not here to totally lecture you, although I'm an elder now, I can do that, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to share a story with you. First from the people here, and then from my people across the water. Lower Elwha, where my mother was born, in that area, Port Angeles area. She moved here as a young woman around World War II, and she worked in the shipyards here. She was Rosie the Riveter. I didn't know that until my aunt told me a few years ago. So we have a long history here, but not as long as the people who've always lived here. And they tell a story. I'm not going to tell the whole story. It takes about half an hour to tell. I'm going to give you the high points and kind of lead you to the end of it. A long time ago, North Wind and South Wind, they were the headmen of villages a little further up here, a couple miles upriver from here. And they, at one time, North Wind killed South Wind and turned this into a land of cold and ice and snow. It was like an ice age, an eternal winter. South Wind's son, South Wind had been killed by North Wind. South Wind's son grew up and became like his father. His name was Storm Wind, but as he got older, they said, oh, he is his father, he is South Wind. He and North Wind had a battle because the world needed to change. The world was frozen. It was not changing. It was an eternal ice age. And so North Wind and South Wind had a battle. South Wind's mother, the grandmother of the young man, helped them by bringing rain. She brought a rain that first thawed the ice and snow, then melted the ice and snow, and then washed it away. She brought a misty rain that thawed the ice and snow, a heavy rain that melted the ice and snow, and a storm rain that washed away the ice and snow. So that winter was broken. The hold of that winter was broken. And the land returned to its normal processes, its natural processes. And so they speak of a time when this land was different than it is now. But it had to be fought for. South Wind fought to bring the natural cycles of the world back. The grandmother helped him. In her wisdom and her power, she helped him. And so now North Wind had to leave, but he was told, he comes from the north, obviously. He comes from the north, he brings cold ice and snow in November. Some of you that might have been born and raised here remember a Thanksgiving Day storm or an Election Day storm in November. That is North Wind coming in, bringing winter. He stays here, and if he's not watched, he'll stay here for a long time. So South Wind appears in like late March, early April. Comes from the south, brings warm clouds and rain, and removes the winter. The winter leaves. So the native people see the cycle of the winds as a way of measuring time, measuring life. North Wind appears, brings ice and cold and snow in November. South Wind appears, so one world is ending. When North Wind appears, one world ends. Winter has come, one world is ending. But then South Wind appears, brings warm clouds and rain and the salmon back up the rivers. And so South Wind brings back life. So North Wind appears, one world is ending. South Wind appears, a new world begins. This cycle they see over and over and over again. And then you look at the idea of winter. You look at the idea of spring. One is an end of something, the other the beginning. And so the native people believe in their stories, they share this concept over and over again. And if you watch the river itself, as they did, the river is named for them, you see that a flood will rise, one world ends, a flood recedes, a new world begins. So for native people, time is not one thing that just goes on, a line that goes on into eternity. It is a cycle that repeats itself over and over again. And so as we see this cycle happening, the world in the old story was trapped. It was trapped by an eternal winter when nothing could change. And a dam was built across the river. And the life force of the salmon and the water itself were blocked. And so the people had to, in this story, see that that could be ended. That another force will come in and make that life cycle return again. And so again, by doing this, seems like a small thing. I know it's a major thing for Native people. To see this land return to where it is, to where it was, to where it can be, that's a powerful act in itself. To recognize this land, this earth we're walking on, is a living thing. And so my people, I'm going to parallel that with a story from my people along the Elwha River. About 100 years ago, 2 dams were built on the Elwha River illegally. They were illegal because they had no fish ladders for the salmon to get around the dams. And so because of that, the salmon runs were wiped out. My people, the lower Elwha people, fought those dams for over 100 years. They said those dams would be removed. And it was very powerful that they were told over and over again, you can't do that. The river is now tamed by our culture. We have tamed the river. And so therefore we use it for our own needs, for our own power. And so the Elwha people, as they went along, they gathered some allies. You might know a few years ago that river, those dams came down. Whoever built those dams, again, didn't care about the salmon. And they didn't care about the people who lived along the river. And so those dams came down a few years ago. The fisheries people were telling us that maybe in 3 or 4 years the salmon might return. Within 6 months, the salmon are coming back up the river. Our people say the salmon were waiting for us to do this thing, to return the world to its normal state. And so even though I was born and raised here in the city, my relatives, my elders taught me these things, and I carry with them in my heart. And so it makes me very happy to see that these steps are being taken now. Because, again, a small thing, a small park in a small part of the river. But in our old stories, it reminds us over and over and over again, the major things that happen are many, many small things that occur. The major changes that happen come about by small, small steps. So I see this as a small step. I'm going to do one song for you to tell you this, to share this song with you. I'm going to sing the Changer song. We have a mythic story here about a being who is called the Changer. He came into the world before humans were in the world, and he got the world ready for us. This is our mythic story that we tell in different ways by different tribes all around here. And the first thing he created, when he was up in the mountains getting the world ready, he created salmon, put salmon in the rivers. Then he had to figure out, did the river go, should the river come uphill one side of the mountain and downhill the other side? He said, no, it's all going to go down from the river. The rivers are going to come down from the mountains, just not to confuse the salmon. So he put salmon in the water. That's why for Native people, the salmon is our measure of life, because salmon give life to everything. And so the Changer came in the world and did many powerful things to get the world ready for us humans. We live in the world because this being prepared it for us. Salmon, trees, berries, shellfish, all these things were given to us. And our job is to take care of those things. So I'm going to sing for you the Changer song, because the Changer is the spirit of transformation. And what I see here today, what our Native people see here today, is that transformation starting again, that the world can be returned to its natural state. So I'm going to sing for you this song. It's called the Changer song, to honor the Changer, the power of transformation, the power that returns the world to the way it should be, so that all of us, not just we humans, but all the living things can, again, flourish and benefit from our actions. So again, I put my hands up to you. This means thank you. And our people here, you see our gatherings, this means thank you. This means you lift me up, you lift me up, you lift up my heart, you make me happy. So I'm going to sing this song. I'm going to say thank you to the port. Thank you for all the people in the community that work so hard to make this happen. Thank you for the people here supporting all this work. Thank you for seeing that this earth is a living thing, and we're only a part of it. So this is a Changer song. Chaco in it dochwe bahamasi, Conway tam tam hoy hoy alta, oh yo oh yo oh yo oh yo oh yo oh yo. Again, Chatningson, thank you. Siam, Nishayacha, my good friends, thank you. And now we're going to call the speakers over to the shovels, right? And we're going to do some digging. I thought it was going to be a building or something. We're digging to put plants in the earth, which is a much better reason to dig, all right? Thank you. Thank you. Chatningson, thank you.
Thank you, ready? All right, here we go.
Where are we throwing it at?
Just turn it over.
No real work today.
Thank you all. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Carmen, come teach me how to do this.